I'll even say I'm a life coach. I started the Daily Dish Show to share my story, my truth, and my journey to vibrancy, and to inspire others to do the same. Because it's all about grit, perseverance, and finding a way despite the odds. It's about embracing the whole woman, not just the parts that are easy to love, and feeding her heart, mind, body, and soul. But I found that this isn't just my story, it's your story too. It's go time. This is the Daily Dish. Hello, lovelies. How is everybody today? I am over at my daughter's house, as you can probably tell. Hi there, Catherine. You can tell because this isn't my office. This is Caroline's house. You know, she's a photographer. Those are her props behind me. So she's got all kinds of really cool things that I would just like to kidnap and take home. Just going to say. Anyway, we have a lot going on, and I'm glad you're here. Jocelyn, good to see you. If you have yet to taken advantage of our we're all done here with our supplement sale, I don't know what you're waiting for. Hey, Yolanda, good to have you here. This is the thing. I'm going to say this right now. This is what you need to know, especially with we have two things that you will not find anywhere else. One is Crave Water, and that's our lemonade flavored L-glutamine that is so good at killing cravings. It's good for your muscle soreness. It really helps with recovery in a big way. Also helps with your gut health. The other one is our over 40 water. And you know what our over 40 water has in it, right? It has everything that you need for your mood, for your hormones, for your skin, hair, and nails. It hits everything. It hits and checks all the boxes. It's a fabulous drink, which I love with all of my heart. And this one is those two, the Crave Water and the Over 40 water, we have the most of. Everything else is dregs. Dregs. I mean, like hardly anything left. So if Caroline is getting hellos, hello, Caroline, back there. She's in the kitchen. But listen, if you have not taken advantage of this, it is time. This week, we'll have sold out of everything. And we have, don't worry, everybody's asking me, so what do you recommend? What do you recommend? Just hold on to your seats, okay? We've got some big stuff coming. I'm not going to leave you in the lurch. You know I love you. I would never leave you going, just figure it out. Figure it out. So that's where we are. All right. That's where we are. And this is how it is. And this is how we get things done around here. I don't just like make these willy-nilly, assessments. Let's just do this. There's always something else coming up. There's also something else on the horizon. There's also another level up. I want to make that clear because when I'm making changes, and you'll see we're talking about change here today. We're talking about the fear of change. I had a big time fear of change, of letting go of the supplements because I have formulated some of them and because I loved them and what they do. And because I didn't want to let it go, I love it. It was really fun. But there comes a time when you recognize and you realize that holding on instead of letting go is going to impede your progress in becoming the woman that you want to become. For me too. And that's why we're going to be talking about what we're talking about today. So if you go to savingdinner.com/show, you will see what we have left. We have a few chocolate and vanilla perfect paleo protein. I think we still have a few of those left. Hey, Jeanette, good to see you. Not sure if we do or not. But here's the thing that you need to know. If it's there, it's there. If you see it on the website, it's there. But there's this is how many supplements, this is the listing. This is how many there are instead of pages of pages, sold out of all of them, which is great. So I want you to promise me if you want something, you're going to go get it because it is up to 50% off. We've never done that. And we never would, except that we are willing to do that in order to get it all done. There's my girl, Tanya. Hi, Tanya. Good to see you. She's watching as she works. I'm not going to tell anybody, Tanya. All right. So that's what we have going on. Also, our quote of the week is Marcus Aurelius. I love the Stoics. The Stoics come up with these brilliant things that just make you turn over in your head and think, think, think. This is one of them. When you arise in the morning and think of what a privilege it is to be alive, to think, to enjoy, and to love. When you arise in the morning, this is what we should be thinking about, right? These are the things that we need to be thinking about. This is what sets the table, if you will, for that kind of a vibrant life, because that's going to dictate where your energy goes. Isn't that true? I should have brought my water. Also, the Recreate Your Book Club. Listen, we still have 2 great books to go through. You might still want to enjoy this. There's 2 fabulous books that are just absolutely killer. You can find them at savingdinner.com/recreate. Go take a look at that, because I will tell you, it is one incredible group of women that do this book club. And 2, you know, you come away with that little bit of something extra, and you learn so much about how this information has direct impact on your life. That's how important it is. So anyway, I'm just letting you know that's what's up. So let's get right into the show, because this one, there's a big fly trying to get me. This one is for me. Sometimes these shows, I write these shows for myself, and this one is not an exception. But I will tell you, I'm going to guess it's going to hit some spots and check some boxes for you as well. Isn't it funny how we go on these parallel journeys together? I think it's kind of interesting. But the title of the show is Fear of Change and Why Your Brain Fights Transformation. But we're also not going to just talk about what happens. We're also going to learn how to move from it, past it. So I know that every single one of us is in the place, if we are women who are aware of what's going on in our universe. We're always looking at bettering our lives. We want more vibrancy, deeper peace, maybe. Maybe we even want to say, you know what? This is the wrong direction. I need to go this direction instead. Can you relate to that one? I know I can. So the other thing is, we read the books, we do the vision boards, we buy the planners. Okay. And why do we do it? Because we want change. And then what happens? We end up scrolling, doom scrolling. We end up snacking all it up and making bad choices when we go to restaurants. We suddenly stall out on everything in our lives, on all the things that we were planning on with our goals, with our our vision boards, growing from. So we get to this place where suddenly now, just folding the laundry seems like the biggest chore, and it's hard and it's ugh, right? I want to tell you why this happens, because this is the interesting thing, and it's because of your brain. And we've talked about this. Your brain is brilliant, but it isn't wired for growth. This is the thing that I find so interesting. We have to buck our own system in order to make way for growth. We have to create that neural pathway, because it's not there normally. It's not there. It's not wired for growth. It's wired for safety. And you're going to find out later, exactly what safety is, keyword consistency. And we'll kind of go through all of that. So we're going to discuss this with the science and see what it is that we can do to make a difference and make it not happen. Because there's a big deal here. Hey, there's my girl Trish right there. Speaking of book club, she's a book club girl. Trish, you're going to love this show. It's about the fear of change and why your brain, fights transformation. It's just the way it is. So anyway, so at the root of your brain, of course, is, we all know what this is. It's the amygdala. The amygdala hates change. It's very primal. It's always sounding the alarm. It's always yelling, danger, 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 get out. It's scanning for threats continually. It's looking at it and saying, is this threat a huge, monstrous saber-toothed tiger? Or is this threat a new career path? Because if you'll notice, it's something that surprises and takes you off guard and from doing the same thing that you always do. That is what is considered a threat by your amygdala. So remember this. This is the easy thing is that unfamiliar equals unsafe according to the amygdala. This is why we don't allow the amygdala to make our decisions. We need to recognize when the amygdala is trying to hijack our best intentions, our becomingness, our ideas of having this kind of the kind of life that we're always talking about. So if this sounds familiar and maybe even predictable, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. So every time you start to stretch towards something new, your brain is going to be whispering, "What if I fail?" Your brain's going to be saying, "What if they judge me?" Hmm? Ever heard that one before? Ever said that one? What if I lose everything? And I'll tell you, these are not intuitive warnings. These are your default settings in your brain. This is what the amygdala does. And when the amygdala is in charge, you live your life in fear, period. That's why I think it's so important that we understand how our brain operates. This is why we need to understand that our prefrontal frontal cortex, the best part of our brain, the brain part that actually has the ability to analyze, conceptualize, to abstract think, and look through many, many layers. That part of your brain needs to be the brain in charge, not the amygdala. The amygdala is a knee jerk reaction, and the amygdala is fearful of everything, including the good things, because if they equal change, it equals unsafe. Does that make sense? So the second part of this though is there's one more part of this that just makes it difficult to make these changes, and it's why we're fearful maybe of these changes. And it's a little bit wild. Joe Dispenza's got us on this, and it's that your body gets addicted to the familiar. Mm. So this is what Joe Dispenza he said, your body becomes addicted to the hormones you produce every day, especially those that are tied to emotion. All right? That means you might be literally addicted to stress because this is part of your familiar pattern. Also, you have a big stamp of approval on this stress cycle and anger and bitterness and all the rest of it because the amygdala says familiar equals safe. You see how this works? Isn't this bizarre? But it's interesting. Also, your self-doubt, that's also some kind of a chemical change in your body. And that means that it keeps you at the same place in this continuous loop simply by making you feel these things and keeping you small. So transformation is threatening chemical familiarity. And that's part of the whole science of this. So your body will trigger discomfort, not because something's wrong, but because something's different. Ding, ding, ding. Is something going off for you? It sure does for me. Something is different. Now, remember when I was telling you, it took me a year to come to the conclusion that I need to not be selling supplements. And it's not because I don't love supplements. It's not because suddenly I went, oh, you know what? Supplements are bogus. I don't think so. I'm very much a believer in supplements. I'm still am going to make suggestions to other companies that, hey, you might want to pick up over 40 water. You might want to do our Crave water seriously, because I don't want to see them go away forever, which they are in the process of doing. Those two things, one of the reasons why I held on for so long, because we can get other things other places, and I know where we can go to get them. But those two things, that was my big holdback. But the thing is that I was stuck in that place of not letting go of something to make room for something else. That's what our amygdalas do. They hold us prisoner in our own little loops and keep us silenced, keep us saying the same things, keep us from becoming the best that we can possibly be. Because it's when we let go that we risk, and the amygdala does not like that one little bit. But again, we have to remember who is going to have sovereignty in our brain and sovereignty in our lives. It has to be the prefrontal cortex, and I'm promising you, most of us are not thinking about it enough to allow for, "Oh, wait a minute. Maybe what's going on here is that knee jerk, I don't like risk, change means unsafe, amygdala response. And I'm not giving myself an opportunity to really think through it and to also understand the complexity of what I'm thinking about cannot be a knee jerk reaction at all. It is going to need to be something that needs to be thought through. I like to think of it this way. The amygdala is back here, my prefrontal cortex there. It's going to creep along and finally land into my prefrontal cortex. And if I give it that time, then I'm going to start putting together pieces that help me to put together a different reality. Trish said, I'm going to start asking myself, is this my intuition guiding me or is this my amygdala trying to be in charge? That is so, so good. It is so good and so true. I get that. 100% I get that because this is how we roll, you know? It is how we roll. We need to start questioning what this is about and we need to understand where these decisions are coming from. Our intuition is very much connected right here into our into our hearts and also into our prefrontal cortex. The deep thinking is definitely in our intuition. Hey Taurus, hi. I'm glad you're here. Anyway, we have to look at this because the other part of this is that your identity is wired for consistency. That's why even when things are really horrible, that we will keep our identity the same because the amygdala is saying this is what's safe for us. This is what, even in an abusive situation or whatever it is, psychologists call it identity preservation. So we have this internal model of who we are, and our subconscious will do whatever it can to maintain that. Absolutely. Even if it's outdated, even if it's false, even if it no longer serves us, even if it makes us angry, frustrated, and just wondering what the heck is wrong and why can't I get off the dime? But this is what it's about, you know? So if you have an inner script that says, I'm the helper, not the leader, I'm bad with money, I always put others first, then any change that contradicts that self image is going to activate resistance. And you're going to say, I'm not going to fold that laundry. I'm going to sit up my butt on the sofa and scroll. I'm going to do something else because that change is aligned with growth. Growth is aligned with change. They go hand in hand. And that is something your amygdala absolutely hates, fears, and will do anything to stop you. And that's scary. And then also we have this whole thing with identity, you know? So we got to look at this. So then we've got this fear loop. And this is what the process goes like. You imagine a better version of your life. Your brain labels it, oof, dangerous because it's new. And then your body reacts with anxiety, fear, depression. Does this sound familiar at all? This is how it all works. And then you interpret that station as, you know what, I'm just not ready. It's not the right time. That's what I did with the whole thing with the supplements. Or you retreat. And that's the other thing that you do. I remember little, you know, things from Jenny when we were like going through this whole last year. Have you given it another thought about this? Something I said, yeah, I'm still mulling it over. It's still on the back burner. I'm still thinking about it. And that is the fear loop. What if I, what if, Now, we can ask the what if question, but we can ask it with two different personas. The what if question from the amygdala's point of view or the what if question from the prefrontal cortex point of view. And what do you think they are? What if I fail? What if it doesn't work? What if everybody hates me? That's your amygdala. Or their prefrontal cortex will say, what if you become spectacularly successful? What if you did it just this once and everything worked out perfectly? What if you took this chance and it completely changes the trajectory of your life? The difference between those two parts of your brain are night and day. Or we can go back to the fear loop. you know? Step 1 through 5, you know. You know how it works. You imagine a better version of yourself, blah, 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 to the part where you retreat. That is a livable pattern, and it happens every day if you're not paying attention. And I know you are because you are. You're here, for heaven's sakes. And that's how this whole thing works. So, if understand that this loop repeats, and it's not because you're lazy, it's not because you lack willpower, it's because you're wired that way. Until you decide to make a pattern interrupt, until you decide to say, hold on a minute, I am no longer giving my amygdala free rein. I and my prefrontal cortex are going to take over. I own this. So the thing that's so cool is your wiring can be changed. So I mentioned that earlier in the show. Yes, your wiring can be changed because it's a matter of building a new neural pathway. That's simple. So how do we move past this fear of change then? All right. I've got some strategies for you. Some of them are just a little unusual. So if you're taking notes, good. If not, I do hope you're getting our newsletter because they will be in tomorrow's newsletter. The show notes are always on Wednesday. Number 1 is to name the familiar payoff. Okay. So you ask yourself, what do I get to avoid by not changing? It's a good question. Sometimes staying stuck gives you unconscious wins, like we're not going to risk failure. We avoid rejection. We get to stay in control, right? So when we bring this into awareness, guess what that does? It removes the shadow process of avoidance. And that's so huge because now what was in darkness is now in the light, and you can see it for exactly what it is. The other thing is to interrupt the identity loop. That's the pattern interrupt that I was just talking about. Instead of saying, I'm going to try to change, which that's a complicated sentence. And that's like, maybe you start by saying, I'm becoming the person who fill in the blank. I'm becoming the person who follows up on her thing. I am becoming the person who, whatever it is. Here's the deal. This is the subtle change that shifts things and bridges that gap between now and what's next. There's always a gap that we have to navigate in anything, always. And on that gap is the little bridge that we have to build. That's the neural pathway. And that neural pathway is built by us taking even these itty bitty risks and reassuring ourselves that it's okay because we're no longer letting the primal part of our brain, do all of the heavy lifting because it's immature, it doesn't understand, and it doesn't go beyond fear to this part of our brain that can understand the complexity of all of it. It's the difference is between letting a 4-year-old drive a car and letting somebody who has had a driver's license for 20 years drive a car. Who do you want behind the wheel of your car? I'll tell you, I'm not going to go with the fearful 4-year-old. I am going to go with the person who has had the skills and the experience to do that. Your prefrontal cortex has done that for you for years. Now bring it into the equation for the other stuff and just start asking yourself questions, good questions, and expect good answers. So things that you can start saying to yourself is, I'm becoming the kind of person who trusts her instincts, right, Trish? Who trusts her instincts. That just builds a double bond of trust. And it tightens up, the loose ends, if you will, of things just falling apart and falling by the wayside because of fear. This is building trust instead of fear. The other one is I'm becoming the kind of person who honors rest and ambition, meaning you're going to give yourself a break and you're also going to move forward. Oftentimes we have this idea that it's all or nothing. This is not true. It needs to be a balance of things. We need to go press the accelerator, but we also have to press the brake pedal. That's part of driving a car, Excuse me. Pollen today has really been bad. So the number 3 thing, which I think is so important, and this is the micro yes, okay? This is so much fun. Um, Oftentimes, what we have a tendency to do is ask our brains to leap. All of a sudden, we go, "Oh, I get it. And now I'm going to run a marathon in a month." And you've never run a 5K, let alone a marathon. Let's back it back down a little bit and go to the micro yes. Instead, I'm going to walk a 5K or I'm going to do something. I'm going to do something to build up to this. So, for example, maybe you're saying, "Oh man, I've got this icky job. I'm just going to quit it." That's the big whatever. How about no, maybe what you do instead of quitting your job is you go and you update your resume with an eye toward what it is that you want to do ultimately. Instead of launching a business like next week, you buy the domain name and you start thinking about it and start planning for it. And you start doing micro yes things that build you toward that. Instead of confronting someone, you write the letter, even if you never send it. Sometimes it's therapy to just write the letter. Sometimes it's something that shouldn't be sent. Other times it is. I mean, you have to, figure that out. Go through the micro yes process. Maybe it'll help. But what psychologists have discovered is that micro yeses reduce neurological threat and they also help you to build momentum. And number 4 is to create predictable discomfort. Now, hear me on this one, because this is the one that everybody goes, "What?" We have to plan for fear. Fear is always going to show up, right? It's a part of the process. For us to say that we're going to live fearless lives is a big fat lie. I don't know a single soul who is fearless. Less fearful is better. That's what we're looking at. We want to literally schedule our resistance, though, otherwise. So, what you might want to do is take a look at this and say, every time I get to this point, I feel stuck. And I'm expecting that because this is a pattern that you're familiar with, but I'm going to keep going anyway. You know, does that sound familiar? We have a tendency to quit on ourselves when it's not going exactly the way that we want it to go. And I'm going to tell you right now, more often than not, it's going to come to a place where things all get mucked up. And here we are again, and we're feeling stuck and this, that, and the other. And then we quit, only to have to start over. But if we don't quit on ourselves and say, "Okay, you know what? That was just a really bad meal. That was a bad decision. That was a bad this. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to wake up, Target trifecta smoothie. Here we go. I'm going to have my supplements out. I'm going to do my thing. I'm going to hydrate correctly. I'm going to eat the Target trifecta plate. I'm going to feel good in my own skin and stop beating myself up." That's what this is about. Because when discomfort is expected, it loses its power. It loses its power because we don't give up on ourselves. Period. We don't. We don't need to. We understand that it's going to be there. And we understand even if we fail, if we get back up and start again, then we are going to be able to buck that discomfort, because that's where we get that, we, instead of quitting like we always do, we go anyway. I love that because it makes me say, you know what? I do have the power to do that. We all have the power to beat ourselves up, but do we have the power to say, "You know what? Oh, well, let's get up and let's go. What's the lesson I learned?" That's the other thing you need to ask. So, number 5 is to let your nervous system catch up. I've been all about the nervous system lately. By the way, tapping, box breathing, look all of this stuff up if you don't know about it. Box breathing is a Navy SEAL thing. You breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, hold for 4, and keep that pattern up. That's what I use to fall asleep really quickly every single night. But it also helps to reset your nervous system and get you out of that fight or flight. The more that we can do this for ourselves, humming, even gargling, and don't use mouthwash, by the way, use water. Mouthwash kills the microbiome in your mouth. It's bad stuff. But the more that we can do this, the better we are going to be. You could do cold exposure. And I'm not talking about dunking in an ice bucket or even doing a cold shower. They're starting to show that this isn't really good for women. It's good for men, But the studies that they've done on all of these, they've all been about men. They haven't done studies on women particularly doing this. But you can take a cold washcloth and put it right here, like an ice cold washcloth, and put it right here, and it gives your nervous system that same reset without the shock value. That works. The other thing is just some bilateral movement, real simple, real easy. Can I make a suggestion? The 4-minute workout. There it is. Free, simple, easy. We all know how to do it. And guess what? It will help our nervous system to catch up. And I want to say this one thing because I think this is so important. You can't shame yourself into transformation, right? But you can love yourself into it. And you can treat your body, your brain, your nervous system, all the chemistry that's going on inside of you. You can treat it with understanding and kindness and gentleness. And that will help to reset your reset button. And it'll give you an opportunity to just take a step back and to feel really good. Because the thing is, change is embodied. It's not just decided. And we're just proving this right now, talking about all these different things. So here's a final thought for you. The fear of change isn't weakness. It's your brain doing its job. And it's doing its job badly because that's how it's wired to do it. But the good news is that we have the opportunity to change the wiring, to create a new neural pathway. And we can say, you know what, outdated, doesn't work anymore. This, instead of this, I want that. And we need to be very present in this process. We need to be very aware of what this is all about. Because the fact is, you and me are allowed to outgrow this process, outgrow our old stories. We're allowed to grow and to stretch and to become the women of our own dreams. We are. And the thing is that the journey of this transformation begins with one step, not a huge, big, enormous leap, nothing like that. It begins with rebelling against fear and saying, oh, absolutely not. You're not going to have your way. Here's what we're going to do instead. Here's the change that I'm going to make. Here's the micro yes that I'm going to make. So I want you to look at this and, start making those little yeses. Start saying the things that you want in your life. And if you are not a part of my newsletter over on Substack, I'm inviting you to do it. It's The Blooming Era is the name of it. If you're not signed up there, I have free and paid subscriptions there. Start up with a free one if you want. I have lots of content going out continually, usually once a week, sometimes 2-3 times a week. But the point is that I'm doing everything about transformation, mindset, reinvention of where we are. And becoming who you're supposed to be. So I invite you to go take a look at that at Substack. If The Blooming Era, that's me. And meanwhile, you know the deal. We have a ton of availability on some of those supplements. We have almost no availability on a lot of them. My suggestion is that you go get them before they're gone forever. savingdinner.com/show. Oh gosh, Jeanette. Bless you. She said, you don't know how much you're helping so many out here in the world. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for showing up and being a part of my life. And, keep my little family in prayer. I'm going through some stuff right now. And I love you all. And I appreciate every single one of you. Peace be with you. Bye-bye. Thank you for joining me today. You can find me on TikTok for daily tips to help support your most vibrant life. And remember, you are the author of your own story. Until next time.